My mom started dating my ex-husband after our divorce, so I showed my dad the timeline that proved their relationship didn't start when they claimed. My name is Emma Garcia, I'm 34, and about a year ago I divorced my husband, Ryan Davis. We were married for 8 years and lived together in Seattle. There wasn't some dramatic moment that ended our marriage. No huge betrayal, just quiet, almost boring in the way it fell apart. Ryan worked as a software engineer, and I worked as a digital marketer. For most of our marriage, we had stable routines. We paid our bills, hosted friends sometimes, visited my parents in Portland, Oregon a few times a year. From the outside, we looked fine. But inside the house, things had changed. The conversations got shorter. The silences got longer. Small arguments started popping up about things that didn't really matter. Who forgot to buy groceries? Who stayed too late at work? Whose turn it was to do something neither of us wanted to do? Eventually, the house felt heavy. One night, Ryan sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I think we both know this isn't working anymore." I didn't argue. That was the strange part. I didn't feel shocked. I felt tired. So we agreed to divorce. The process was simple. We didn't have kids, and the house technically belonged to Ryan because he bought it before we got married. I packed my things and moved into a small apartment in Seattle. The first few months after the divorce were awkward but peaceful. I focused on work. I rearranged my new place. I tried to get used to living alone again. Ryan and I barely spoke. The one person who kept bringing him up was my mom. My mother, Ava Garcia, is a real estate agent who lives with my dad, John Garcia, in Portland. She's the kind of person who can talk to anyone and make it sound like she's known them forever. When Ryan and I were married, she liked him a lot. My parents both did. So at first, I didn't think much of it when she mentioned him occasionally. She'd say things like, "I ran into Ryan when he was in Portland," or "He asked how you were doing." It made me uncomfortable, but I figured it would fade over time. Instead, it kept happening. About 6 months after the divorce, she started bringing him up more often. She'd say things like, "Ryan seems really lonely," or "Divorce must be hard on him." One time she even said, "Maybe you two just needed some time apart." That comment irritated me. The divorce wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the end of a marriage that had already run out of energy. Still, I tried not to start an argument with her. A few months later, I drove to Portland to have dinner with my parents. My younger brother Noah Garcia was there too. He works as a personal trainer and lives nearby. The evening started normally. But when dinner was served, I noticed something strange. My mom had cooked Ryan's favorite meal. The exact same dish she used to make for him every year on his birthday. I stared at the plate for a moment and then joked, "Wow, did Ryan request this or something?" My mom laughed quickly. "No, of course not." The answer came a little too fast. Noah glanced at me but didn't say anything. At the time, I let it go. But little details started adding up. My mom suddenly knew things about Ryan's life that I definitely hadn't told her. She mentioned that he had traded in his car. She knew he was thinking about changing the furniture in his house. One afternoon, she casually said something that made me stop mid-sentence. She said, "Ryan asked me to help him pick out some furniture last week." I looked at her. "You went shopping with Ryan?" She shrugged like it was nothing. He wanted advice. I felt a strange twist in my stomach, but I told myself I was overreacting. After all, Ryan and I were divorced. Technically, he could talk to anyone he wanted. Still, the situation felt strange. The moment everything finally collapsed happened about 3 months ago. I was visiting my parents again, sitting in the living room with my dad while the TV played quietly in the background. Out of nowhere, he said, "Your mom's out with Ryan tonight." I thought he meant something casual. Maybe she helped him with a real estate question. So I asked, "What do you mean out?" My dad looked confused. "Dinner." I waited. That was all he said. So I asked again, "Why are they having dinner together?" He frowned slightly. "They've been going out pretty regularly." The room suddenly felt quiet. I asked slowly, "What do you mean, going out?" My dad hesitated. Then he said, "Well, dating, I guess." For a second, I thought he was joking. I laughed and said, "Very funny." He didn't laugh. He just stared at me. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Wait, you didn't know?" Apparently my parents had been keeping it quiet. My mom thought I might take it the wrong way. I didn't say another word. I grabbed my bag and left. The drive back to Seattle felt unreal. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. When I got home, I called my mom immediately. She answered like everything was normal. "Hi, sweetheart." I skipped the small talk. "Are you dating Ryan?" There was a pause. Then she sighed. "I was hoping to tell you later." My chest felt tight. "You're serious?" "Yes." No hesitation. No apology. Just yes. I asked how long it had been happening. Her voice stayed calm. "About 4 months." She explained it like it was a simple story. She ran into Ryan at a coffee shop in Portland. They started talking about the divorce. She said he seemed hurt and misunderstood. They kept meeting to talk. Eventually, they started having dinner. Then the dinners turned into a relationship. Her explanation ended with a sentence I still can't get out of my head. You and Ryan weren't right for each other. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person. I told her she had crossed a line most people wouldn't even imagine crossing. She answered immediately. You left him. The words hit like a slap. You can't expect everyone else to abandon him too. I said, this isn't about abandoning him. It's about boundaries. Her voice sharpened. We're adults, Emma. Nobody owns another person. Technically, she was right. But logic doesn't erase betrayal. A few days later, Ryan called me. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. He said he wanted to clear the air. I stayed silent. He told me the relationship with my mom wasn't planned. He said they had developed a connection. Then he added something that made my skin crawl. You know how easy she is to talk to. I hung up before he could finish. The fallout spread through the family quickly. My brother Noah was furious. He told my mom the whole thing was disgusting. My dad seemed angry too, but mostly confused and quiet. Some relatives said the relationship was completely wrong. Others said Ryan and I were divorced, so technically nobody had broken any rules. Meanwhile, my mom sounded happier than I'd heard her in years. She kept sending me messages. I hope someday you understand. I stopped replying. About 2 months later, my cousin Rose Walker, who lives in Denver, Colorado, and works as a dental assistant, called me. Rose tends to know everything happening in the family. She said, I thought you should know something. My stomach tightened. Ryan's been staying overnight at your parents' house. My childhood home. The place where we had birthdays and holidays. The house where my parents raised us. Now my ex-husband was sleeping there with my mother. I haven't spoken to her since. Some days I feel angry. Some days I just feel numb. But the thing that keeps bothering me is the timeline. Because when I look back at everything now, the dates don't seem right. My mom says their relationship started 4 months after the divorce. But she knew details about Ryan's life long before that. She defended him constantly. She saw him in Portland more times than I realized. And the more I think about it, the more one question keeps coming back. If their relationship really started after the divorce, why does it feel like they were already getting close while I was still married to him? And if that's true, I don't know if I'll ever forgive either of them. For the first few weeks after finding out about my mom and Ryan, I tried to ignore it. I told myself the same thing everyone else kept repeating. Ryan and I were divorced. 2 adults can date whoever they want. But the more I tried to move on, the more something about the story didn't sit right with me. It was the timeline. My mom insisted they only started seeing each other 4 months after the divorce. She repeated that number every time she explained it. For months. But when I started replaying the last year of my marriage in my head, little details started coming back. Details I hadn't paid attention to at the time. Ryan had gone to Portland a lot during that final year. At the time, it made sense. My parents lived there, and we used to visit together all the time when we were still married. But once we started having problems, I stopped going as often. Ryan still went occasionally. He'd say things like, your mom invited me to dinner, or I'm passing through for work, I might stop by and say hi. I never questioned it. My parents loved him. Why wouldn't they want to see him? But now, sitting in my apartment in Seattle, those memories started lining up in a way that made my stomach twist. I opened my laptop one night and started scrolling through old photos and calendar reminders. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. At first, everything looked normal. Family dinners. Holidays. Random weekends when Ryan drove down to Portland. Then I noticed something strange. One of Ryan's work trips to Portland happened about 3 months before our divorce. At the time, I barely thought about it. But when I checked the date more carefully, I realized something. That trip happened the same week my mom later claimed she randomly ran into him at the coffee shop. The same coffee shop she said started their entire relationship. That wasn't the only thing. There were 2 other visits that year. 2 more weekends where Ryan went to Portland without me. At the time, I assumed he was visiting my parents. Now I wasn't so sure. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that something about their story didn't add up. A few days later, my cousin Rose Walker called again. Rose is the kind of person who hears everything eventually. She asked how I was doing. I told her the truth. I think they're lying about when it started. There was a long pause on the phone. Then Rose said something quietly. You're not the only one who thinks that. That got my attention immediately. What do you mean? She hesitated. Well, people noticed your mom and Ryan talking a lot at family gatherings even before the divorce. I felt my chest tighten. Rose kept talking. It wasn't obvious. But a few people thought it was weird. Weird. That word echoed in my head. Because once she said it, more memories started coming back. Times when my mom defended Ryan during arguments. Moments when she'd say things like, you're being too hard on him, whenever Ryan and I had problems. At the time, I thought she was just trying to keep the peace. Now it felt different. Now it felt like she'd been taking his side long before the marriage ended. A week later, I decided to do something I hadn't done since the divorce. I looked through old messages between Ryan and me. Most of them were boring, everyday conversations. Groceries, bills, work schedules. But one message stood out. It was from the night Ryan drove to Portland for that work trip. He texted me that evening. "Your mom says hi." At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now it felt strange. Why was he texting me that? Why mention her specifically? The more I looked at everything, the more uncomfortable I felt. Because if my mom and Ryan really did start their relationship months after the divorce, then none of this should exist. None of these earlier visits. None of these strange conversations. None of the way my mom kept defending him during our marriage. The timeline she gave me only worked if you ignored everything that happened before it. Eventually, I realized I needed to show someone. So the next time I drove to Portland, I brought my laptop with me. My dad was sitting in the kitchen when I arrived. He looked tired. The situation between him and my mom had clearly been getting worse. I sat across from him and opened my laptop. "I need to show you something." He frowned slightly. "What is it?" I turned the screen toward him and showed him the dates. Ryan's trips. The coffee shop meeting. The timeline my mom had given me. Then I showed him where the story didn't match the reality. He stared at the screen for a long time, scrolling slowly, reading each date. When he finally leaned back in his chair, his face looked older somehow. He said quietly, "They told everyone it started after the divorce." "I know." He pointed at one of the dates. "This trip, this was before you two separated." "Yes." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he shook his head. "They've been lying." That sentence felt strangely calm. But I knew what it meant. Because if my dad could see the truth in that timeline, then eventually the rest of the family would see it too. I didn't yell. I didn't confront my mom that night. I just left the laptop open on the kitchen table. And once my dad saw the dates for himself, everything started falling apart on its own.